to the next episode of Real Solutions with Anna Aquino, and I am really honored to have a super awesome, fabulous writer with us today. His name is Alton Gansky, who has just written almost everything. I was going through your bio, and I was like, that's cool. That's cool. That's cool. So it's an honor to have you here.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you today.
So I always, as we were talking earlier, I always want to ask people, because I think everyone has a story. You know, God, I believe, created people to do uniquely what they're called to do, and you have found your niche. So how did you find your niche, and how did you get to do what you're doing now?
Well, I think I found it by doing everything else but what I should have been doing. It's kind of the way my life works out sometimes, is I just keep trying things, and sooner or later I'll do something right. I have a very eclectic background. I've been a firefighter. I've worked in a bank. I was a pastor for 22 years. I worked in architecture for 10 years, and I was doing some writing during that time, and decided to take the writing seriously. I always thought I'd write nonfiction books, but of my 45 books or so that I've written, most are novels. Now, I have written about 10 nonfiction books and helped others write some nonfiction books. So I've done about 10 of those. And I enjoy both mediums. They're very different, of course. They work different parts of the brain. So I get different brain cramps on nonfiction than I do on fiction.
That's awesome. And so a little bit, God was just leading you to where he was calling you to do. Where was your aha moment that this is just boom, this is what I was created to do?
Well, as a child, I was making up stories all the time, and I still do that. But that was a big part of my life. I had a very active imagination. I didn't have a lot of athletic skills. I did okay for street football and stuff, but I didn't have anything that's going to pay off in high school or college, anything like that. I just didn't get that kind of genetic help that some people have. But I did have an imagination. And oddly enough, even as a child, I wrote a few stories, got myself into a bind that I couldn't write myself out of. So I put it aside and did other things. But I also had a great love for architecture, and I ended up going into that for quite a while. But still messing around with the writing. It's some people call writing an addiction.
It is.
It's kind of that way.
Yeah.
And then I got interested, did some short form work, and by that I mean articles, reviews. I think my first review was in maybe Moody magazine or something like that. So I did a bunch of book reviews, and then I wrote a few short articles, all of them horrible, and probably shouldn't have been printed. But I guess it was just a kindness on their part. They were doing something nice for me to go ahead and put those up there. And then I just had to follow the other things I was doing. I was pastoring at the time, and I had 3 young children. The thing that really changed me is I was, as a pastor, making a visit in a children's hospital. A child had fallen out of a moving car. Now, let me cut to the end of that very quickly. Child was fine. Car was barely moving when the child fell out. So, but I didn't know that when I went in. I didn't know what to expect going in. I assumed they were going down a residential street. The kid fell out at 35 miles an hour or something. So I was expecting the worst. And I noticed something when I was walking through the hospital, children's hospital. I was just a young guy at the time, that I wasn't looking at any of the rooms. I've been in many hospitals, but children's hospital is a whole different ballgame.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed I wasn't looking in the rooms. I wasn't looking at patients, but I got a very good view of the shiny linoleum floor. And of course, what I was doing is I was protecting myself from seeing the bad that's out there. Did what I was supposed to do. The kid was fine, comforted the family some. But on my way out, I became ashamed that I didn't have the courage to look into the rooms. And I also began to wish that I'd had the gift of healing. When I say that, I mean the gift of healing by choice, a Peter type, an Apostle Paul type of healing, where you can choose to heal or not to heal. And I thought, if I did, what I would do is I would beat feet to the closest hospital and start walking through the hallways and into the rooms. And that became the idea for my first book, By My Hands. So by the time I got back into the car, this idea occurred to me. I was thinking I was going to be a nonfiction writer. I ended up writing the novel. And
Amen.
yeah, it was kind of weird when when that happened, then I set it aside for 5 years because
Hmm.
I knew nothing about writing. I didn't go to writers' conferences. Later, I would lead one for 6 years, but I'd never been to a writers' conference. I was just kind of finding my way, and I sent it to a pay-to-read agent. I didn't know you didn't do things like that. Well, that was just one of the many bonehead things that I did, and then I took the comments made by the agent's reader so hard that I just put the thing away for 5 years.
Aw.
And yeah, it's really one of my favorite stories. I then had changed churches, and a friend of mine, Jack Kavanaugh,
Hmm.
uh, a well-known writer, and
Yes.
we started a little competition who's going to publish first. I published first, but it was a very small piece. He got a book contract that became a three-book contract that became, I think, a 12-book contract. Yes, boom, boom, boom. So I didn't
But
have
you still
anything to brag
published
about.
first.
Yeah, but I published first in a magazine no one ever read,
That's okay.
but I published first. And so he had called me and was telling me about this contract that he got and that they'd upped the number of books. And so he was really on his way with that. So I was rejoicing with him. And then he did something that I'll never forget. And it's really a great lesson in life. So when we were done rejoicing about his contract, he said, "So what are you working on?"
Hmm.
I said, "Well, Jack, I got a young family now, and I'm up at this church, and it was kind of an experimental church for me. I have a degree in church growth, and my master's degree is in church growth, and so I was trying some principal things there. So I'm the only person on staff, and it's a tiny church and a out of the way place, and yada yada yada." He goes, "Yeah, I understand. I've been a pastor for a long time. What are you working on?" And so I went through a series of excuses, and then it finally occurred to me he wasn't going to hang up, um, until I made a commitment. And so finally, he placed a well delivered boot to my fanny, and I picked up the book again, rewrote
Good.
it, submitted it
Good.
to his publisher, and it sold.
Good. That's
And then that
awesome.
started it. That was 45 books ago.
Wow, that's just awesome. I think that it's not uncommon that a lot of people get into that rut. Dr. Seuss has this great, I think it's in the book, Oh, the Places You Will Go, when unslumping yourself is not easily done. We've all found ourselves on a lurch. We all need somebody to say, smack, get off the lurch. And that's awesome that he was able to be that in your life. Now, I was looking down at the books that you have going on right now. Talk to me about the nonfiction book. That looked really interesting about the history of the church.
Oh, we did a couple of those, and really the idea started with my agent, and he asked me if I'd be interested in doing a book on that, and I thought I would. So we did two books. One is called 60 People Who Shaped the Church, and
Mm-hmm.
it was uh, though it deals with church history, it wasn't meant for historians. It was meant for the person in the pews to then get a sense of the
Mm-hmm.
good, the bad, and so look at the lives of 60 people, uh, the good folks, the rogues, is what it says on the cover. So you got the good guys, the bad guys, the things we did right, the things we did wrong, and I looked at 60 of those, and then drew some application for our lives today, so that readers would understand that we didn't get to where we are today overnight. There were
Mm-hmm.
a lot of misturns and mid-course corrections and those sorts of things to get there. And so it's a fascinating story, especially different backgrounds. Of course, a lot of it in Europe and that sort of thing. And then later we follow that up with 30 events that shaped the church. And there, instead of focusing just on the people, I focused on a particular event in the church. So we start very early on Pentecost,
Mm-hmm.
and move all the way through the rise of fundamentalism and evangelicalism and um, into the Jesus freak movement and the fighting fundies and
Mm-hmm.
the moral majority and those kinds of things. So we cover really all the bases in between to see how those things happened and the good and the bad that came from all of them. I try to paint a clear and unbiased picture of that. And then in writing one of those, I did a chapter, the longest chapter on the Scopes trial because I fell in love with the topic. So I'm still working on
That's really
Scopes.
cool. And so tell me about your fiction book too, because you're just a writing machine, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, mostly what I'm doing now is just a little bit different. I have been writing full-length novels for a long time.
Hmm.
Most of my 45 books, I guess it's 30 something now that are uh, full-fledged, full-length novels. And I've been doing that since first one came out in 1996. So been doing those. Recently, what I've been working on is more of an experimental piece, and I'm working with three other authors.
I saw that. That's
Yeah,
cool.
so I'm working with Frank Peretti. He's no longer part of the group now because he had to move on to another project. But Frank Peretti, Bill Myers, and Angela Elwell Hunt, and then Jeff Gerke's coming on. He's
Neat.
taking Frank Peretti's position with a different character. And it was an interesting concept that Bill Myers proposed. He does movies and he's worked television and stuff like that. And he thought, well, readers have a much shorter attention span. What if we presented a series of books of a team that have certain giftings? They're not all believers. They don't know why they're put together, but nonetheless, they get involved in these things that they have to go through. And we each write from one person's point of view. So every book has a
That's neat.
different point of view. It's all first person. I write from the position of Tank, who's a former football player, young man, but he was injured, and they go on the strangest battles, and it's sort of like an X-Files team.
That's neat.
Yeah, so
That's really
Tank's
cool.
the Christian. Then we had one guy. Frank was writing from the position of a former Jesuit priest who became an atheist and traveled around proving there was no God. So it made for some good dialogue.
Sure.
So we
Sure.
really cover all the bases. So we have highly educated people, and Bill Myers writes from Brenda's point of view, and she's a streetwise tattoo artist, and she is able to draw pictures that happen. She sort of sees a glimpse of the future, doesn't always know what it means, but she sees something, and that'll play.
Mhm.
Tank sometimes has the gift of healing, and that's a complication because he never knows if
What
it's
happened?
going to work or not. He has no idea. Uh, Another person, the professor's aide, Andy, that's A-N-D-I, a woman. She sees patterns and everything, and the professor was his only gift was sarcasm and logic, and he put them all together, and it was quite a stew. So
You finding that fiction publishing is starting, Christian fiction publishing, I don't know, maybe it's just my perspective as a newbie, starting to become more and more open to being outside of the box a little bit more with books like Peretti's, This Present Darkness, The Success of It, The Shack, and all those. They're starting to finally go, oh, maybe what's outside of the box here and there.
yeah, because the Christian publishers and what listeners need to understand is there's really two groups. There's the CBA, which is the Christian Booksellers Association. There's the ABA, which is the main market. It's the secular, the general market. And CBA has some different goals and different constraints. So it's a little different writing for them, but they came late to the party, and so there was a big learning curve among publishers, Christian publishers, most of whom are now owned by general market people. But at the time I started, there were all these independent publishers, and they had a lot to learn, just as
Mm-hmm.
we writers had a lot to learn.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So yeah, there's some. Frank Peretti came along with that. There were some others. Ted Decker writes outside
Mm-hmm.
the box. So does Bill Myers. And my
Mm-hmm.
stuff, I always describe myself as writing supernatural suspense. Though I did some mysteries and thriller stuff, but yeah, there was a lot of experimentation with that.
Yeah.
But to make the picture clear, the CBA is mostly women readers. About 80% of all the books are women. Uh, Male readers just don't flock to the books. A lot of it has to do with the way
Yeah.
bookstores are organized and stuff. I could go on forever about that. But anyway, nonetheless, so that market share for guys who write the weird stuff is much smaller. That slice of pie is much smaller
Yeah.
than Amish,
Yes.
romances, and
Yes.
some of the others.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I've had, I mean, you all get turn downs here and there for different things, but I've had turn downs to the point where love the book, protagonist needs to meet by this page, it has to be a female, it has to be this. And I find myself writing to newer, talking to newer authors, trying to explain to them, write what you're seeing that God's showing you, but understand this is a part of the industry. Understand if you're trying to go there are publishers that stick to these guidelines, and just be aware of it. And I find that a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, some more than others. especially if you're writing in romance, that's almost formulaic now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain pattern. It's almost like writing for screenplays because you have to
Right.
have something happen on page 32 of the screenplay.
Right.
Otherwise, they'll reject it. And so, in some ways, it's very much like that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to meet certain criteria. In the area that I write, not so much, because I've done some pretty bizarre things in the writing, as others have. But
Right.
if you're doing certain like cozy mystery and
Right.
romance, yeah, then there's certain things that those editors really want.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm always trying to educate people that come to me and say, you know what, realize that this is what the industry looks like. Just be aware. As you're writing your piece, this is what you need, this is what they want. I believe in divine inspiration, but just be aware.
Yeah, and to be fair to the publishers, because we writers sometimes are pretty hard on them. They're not in the primarily creative mode like
Agreed.
writers are.
Right. Agreed.
They're in business. They're in
Mm-hmm.
business, and when you sign up with a
Absolutely.
publisher, you're asking them to spend an awful lot of money
Mm-hmm.
for editorial, for typesetting.
Absolutely.
Your book will probably go through, if you're lucky, at least 3 editors,
Right.
and those people have to be paid. And then there's typesetting, and
Absolutely.
there's cover work, and there's promotion. It used to be warehousing. Now with
Right.
print on demand, it's not so much that anymore. But they would be in your advance plus all of that,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's going to take them a year, 2 years to recoup some of that, unless you're
Right.
just a monster bestseller. But so in all fairness to them, they have to be picky.
Agreed. 100%. People need to realize that it is a business. And but thank you so much for bringing that up. And I want to thank you so much for also bringing up you were on a lurch and needed to get out of the lurch, and you had people around you that could say, get out of it and do it, because you have certainly broken through a lot of barriers, and that is awesome. Do you consider yourself a forerunner?
In some areas, in some genres, in the Christian publishing, yeah, I was one of the ones who was blazing trails. But there are certainly others. I didn't do it alone. Um, and sometimes those backfire on you. You try something new, and there's just not an audience for it. They, someone once said, this is for New York publishers, when you walk down the street in New York and you see a publisher, you think you're looking at a business, but what you're really seeing is a casino, because no one really knows what's going to work.
Yeah.
Stephen King, they took a chance on Carrie.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times it was rejected. So no one really knows. It's throwing spaghetti against the wall and see if it sticks. So
That needs to be a meme. Publishers
yeah,
like throwing spaghetti on the wall and see if it sticks. Well, I hope all of you watching this today got some education out of this. This is some really good publishing knowledge, and great to hear what he's done. I'm excited for this new project. That's really fun to have 4 well-named authors together for that project. That's awesome. So
yeah. It's experimental. We're still learning our way because they're all novellas. They're not full
yeah.
novels. They're meant to be done and read in a single sitting or 2 sittings.
Hmm.
Uh, because the readership's short attention span and demands
Absolutely.
on their time. So that's the idea behind it. We don't know of anyone else doing it this way. Novellas have been around a long time, but
Hmm.
doing a series like this with different authors, all short books that come out about every 6 to 8 weeks. And it's like watching a television show. It's really what it is. It's watching some kind of television serial or drama.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, I left college a while ago, but even when I left college, they were teaching you to write in shorter sentences to make people go quicker. I've been on this kick about trying to read some older classics that I'd never read before I started on my next book. And some of those older classics would never get published today
Right.
because, snooze yawn fest, even though they're great stories. So
And you know why their sentences were so long?
why were they so long?
Because they were paid by the word.
Really?
Yeah, many many times. Yeah, that's why the descriptions go on for pages and stuff because they were paid by the word. So you'd always use smaller words and more of them, so
What?
you can get paid a little bit more.
I know.
Nowadays, it's not done that way. There
No.
may still be a few magazines that do that, or pulp fiction
Right.
kinds of things. Where you do short stories, sci-fi books like that. But for the most part now, you just get an advance, and then you get a percentage
Wow.
of the royalties
I
that
wouldn't
come
know
in
that you
from
did
it.
that on book form. They paid you by the word in book form. That's wild.
Yeah, early on now.
It's
Well, Many of those that we view as books now were originally done in newspapers and
Well, Uncle
magazines.
Tom's Cabin. I'm sitting here thinking, was an anthology in a newspaper, and she would have gotten paid by the word.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, I never thought about that before.
So that's one of the things that changes when they stop doing that. Then we could
Yes.
write more concisely, and so that's really
Yes.
in the 40s and stuff. You start seeing these changes
Huh.
uh, because you want to write as concisely as possible. One of Al's axioms, I have these little axioms. Al's axiom is uh, writing is putting words on a page. Great writing is taking words off a page.
That's very true.
Yeah, that's the difference.
That is very true. I was talking to Eva Marie Everson, and she was telling me one thing for new writers to always keep in mind is to listen to those edits and to be okay with that, to take all this stuff out. And she was telling me that she had to scrap an 80,000 word book and start again. I
Yeah,
thought, oh, I bet you that's easier said than done. Wow.
that's hap It hasn't happened to me yet. It has happened to people I know
Yeah.
where they just, for some reason, didn't deliver what was being expected. So I've been fortunate that I didn't have to scrap a full book. But yeah, and of course, it's emotional.
Yes.
I'm the same way. You know, when I get my comments from the acquisitions editor, the first editor on the job here, who's doing the content edit with that, it just drives me nuts. My feelings are hurt. Um, you know, I'd let the thing sit next to the my keyboard and wouldn't open it for 2 days, you know, and you just have to allow it to go on, and then you'll feel strong enough to take it on, and then you just take
Yes.
one item at a time.
Yes, I hear you. Been there. Yes, very much. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's an honor to have you, and I appreciate the fact you spent your time to do it.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
I want you all watching to remember that God has awesome plans for your life, so get excited. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.